First of all, we have a partnership up in southwest Idaho. I live in Boise, but it involves the USDA Rural Development, Scott Bell's group in Region 4 out of Ogden, and the Idaho Department of Commerce, Economic Development, who I'm sponsored by, as well as the commissioners, elected officials of 4 counties up north of Adams, Boise, Valley, and Gem, which are rural communities in the kind of north central part of Idaho. And our organization was established, we're relatively young, established in around 2005, and we came up with a mission to effectively utilize the resources of the Boise and the Payette National Forest in job creation and formation of combined heat and power projects and development of alternative energy and ag projects and improvement of forest health. And that's our goal, that's our kind of our mission, and along with that, we established a vision to continue to promote enterprises and growth from endeavors such as I mentioned, and have the partnership evolve into a more self-sustaining entity through collaboration with commerce. And having listed our sponsors and so forth, I do have a number of bosses that I have to bow to, and that makes my job interesting. So I just briefly will mention some projects that we've been involved in up there. One of them is Evergreen Forest Products up in the Council region, who was a sawmill, fairly large one. He produces, in a single shift, he can produce about 80,000 board feet of material. We facilitated 2 grants for him for expansion. He put a cogen operation in up there several years ago that is using biomass from the Payette National Forest, and they have a capacity there of about 130,000 green ton a year just off the Payette. So there's plenty of it there for similar projects like that, and we're certainly involved in promoting those, facilitating financing, loans, grants, whether it's Department of Commerce, whether it's USDA federal, whether it's value-added producer grants through the Forest Products Lab in Madison, Wisconsin. There's various sources, and that's part of our utilization partnership, is to facilitate the entrepreneurs trying to get projects off the ground and up and running, whether they have an idea, and take it to a formulation into a feasibility study, and align them with the proper financing, whether it might be private, might be state, might be federal, but anything that has to do with the utilization of the forest-based material, biomass material. Evergreen, as I said, put in a cogeneration operation. He's in the process now of expanding to with a $10 million operation, which is totally unique in this environment.
Can you explain cogen to our audience, please?
Cogeneration is taking the residual product from the mill, the fines, and the residual chips and so forth into a power generator, to make it simplistic, that generates power off the biomass that he creates from making a primary product, whether it's lumber or pine boards or whatever the case may be. And that's a pretty simple explanation, but that's basically what it is. And there's various megawatts of that, and we don't need to go into the size and increments, but I forget what megawatt it is, but it's been very successful for him, and he's going to continue to expand on it. And as I mentioned, he has a $10 million project underway to produce lumber products for Lowe's exclusively. He's apparently has an agreement with him. In this environment, for somebody to look at the potential upside in lumber products, particularly in this market, as anemic as housing starts have been, is huge. And he just sees more upside in the future than the downside is there. He's one of the very few that is that optimistic and is willing to commit the dollars and so forth to make it happen. With his operation, he's somewhat geared to housing starts, which some of you know were back in 2006 were probably 1.6 million across the country annually as far as new housing construction. They're now down to about 0.4. And with that, the capacity to produce the lumber products, the residual biomass and so forth, has been depleted in the neighborhood of 55 to 60%. So if this market comes back, as I think it will, you'll see lumber prices, you'll see biomass, you'll see the broad spectrum of forest products escalate in a hurry, just because of the loss of that capacity that's been out there to produce the products. So I think he sees that and he's taking advantage of it, and it's nice to see some optimism for a change in the market rather than all the negativism that's been out there for the last 5 years or so. So that's just one. There's another firm there in Emmett, Idaho, which used to be a Boise Cascade property, that when they kind of went through metamorphosis, for lack of a better word, and dissolved into separate entities, they exited the sawmill there in Emmett. And this gentleman from Montana stepped in and saw the future, and God bless him, he was 72 years old at the time. I think next time was 76. He's a sawmill man from the word go, and he's put a tremendous amount of investment of his own money and partners to the tune of $11 million. He's got some hiccups, problems in launching that thing, but he is up and running, and he's producing about 65,000 board feet a day over there. And biomass product, residuals and chips and bark and so forth will be utilized from that as well. So we're all wishing him the best on that, because it's a job creator that put 45 to 60 people back to work where there formerly was nothing. So that's the primary bottom line of our organization is job creation and revenue generation from those entities. Along with that, there's been a couple char facilities in our neighborhood that have evolved. One up in Cascade, Idaho, and another one over in eastern Idaho in Salmon. The Salmon one is geared to youth development, where it will give some jobs to youth and so forth, create jobs for them, and give them a hands-on experience with biomass and forest products and how char is made. We've seen different demonstrations of that, various ones, and they're involved in that, and that's been a successful one. The other one up in Cascade has struggled somewhat due to feedstock, his location being in Cascade, which is high mountain country, the winters are long, a lot of moisture, a lot of snow, and having trouble keeping his feedstock to the proper degree of dryness that needs to be for him to be successful with char. So therefore he's moving his operation down to this other operation I mentioned in Emmett, Idaho, where he can co-join with the producer there and get some dry feedstock for it, and that's underway. So we're wishing him the best on that. So that's just another facet up there that's going on, and we have some current projects that we're endeavoring to undertake. One of them is a defunct pellet mill operation down in Mountain Home that had been there and ran recently up until late winter last year, early spring. And he produced about a truckload a day of wood pellet from fines that were generated from his sawmill. And now the sawmill went through bankruptcy. The pellet mill is in receivership as well, and now owned by an asset company back in the Midwest, and it's about to ready to go to auction in November probably. Any of you that are considering a complete pellet operation, layout, drum dryer, rolling stock equipment, baggers, it's there for the taking. And the last figure I heard was in the neighborhood of, for just the mill equipment and the rolling stock and everything, was around 400,000, and you couldn't go replicate that today if you went out and purchased it. So it's there, it's portable, it could be moved obviously to other locations. Our goal, excuse me.
Rick, why are they throwing in the towel?
The former owner had a sawmill in Boise that was going to produce a log product for log home, and he could take the residual, the fines and the sawdust and the chips, the end cuts and so forth, and utilize that for feedstock in the pellet mill. That imploded, and therefore he lost the feedstock and so forth, and it had a lot of nuances and financial obligations that it couldn't meet, but that was the primary driver behind it.
Feedstock issues.
Yeah, and the feedstock is there from the Sawtooth region, the Mountain Home region. There's plenty of it available. It's something that we would like to see stay there, particularly for Elmore County, which has been targeted as a depressed community and so forth. It's rural, needs jobs, and as I said, I probably sound redundant, that's part of our, a large part of our being is the job creation in those rural areas. So yeah, we're hoping that somebody can get their arms around it and continue to utilize it in the fashion that it was intended for. There's another company
Excuse me, I know a potential buyer here in Utah. Let's hook up about that later.
Okay. We'd be willing to help look at anything on that deal, and I do know the parties involved in it as far as that goes, so yeah, we'll do that there. I kind of ran into a unique situation here within the last month. Back in the mid-90s to late 90s, Boise Cascade engaged a number of landowners over in the Idaho-Oregon border along the Snake River. For some of you that might know where that is, it's the very southwest corner of Idaho. And they proposed a plantation project of hybrid poplar, western poplar trees. Some of them call it, some of you might call it cottonwood, but that's kind of the nickname for it. But it's very fast growing. It'll go to maturity in 12 to 15 years from a seedling. These particular landowners have kept it pruned, harvested, irrigated, and the promise was made to them that at maturity the company would take it to their paper mill up in southern Washington. It was a high-grade product, and it could be paper material just because of the lack of bark in poplar and the molecular structure. It's technically a hardwood, but it competes with alder and aspen and other softwood species. So Boise Cascade kind of went away as well during this whole process, and the landowners were stuck with these mature poplar trees. I've talked to 3 of them. One gentleman has 30 acres, another one has 20, another one has 50. He gave me a list of there was a list of poplar plantation growers LLC in that area. This gentleman happened to be the president, and there's probably a couple thousand acres over there of these mature poplar trees, and they really have no commercial value to the owners of the property. They're all saying, just get it gone, get it off my property. I can't utilize it. I couldn't sell my property with it on here. If you can get me some value for it, fine, so be it. But basically, I want to put the property back into row crops or pasture or whatever and do something with it that doesn't tie it up, and I have to spend money for irrigation and so forth, and I'm beating a dead horse. So I proposed to these folks that we could find utilization for it, whether it was pallet manufacturers or onion box guys. There's a big onion growing region over there. Perhaps in pellet fuel and other avenues like that. However, it didn't promise them any value for it. I said, we will take it, we'll act as brokers, in an LLC capacity, and if there's residual value there for you, we'll kick it back to you for the removal of the stumps and so forth to put your land back to where it wants to be. And so we've been looking at ways to create ancillary revenue streams to support our own organization, just because the finances in government, the Forest Service and Agriculture Department, Department of Commerce, everybody's on budget constraints, and we need to generate more of it for our own being and so forth, and I think this may be one way to achieve that. Okay, that's just another little deal we have going, but I just wanted to kind of wrap up the partnership itself. I know that our situation is kind of unique up there, and it's the fact that we have a number of sponsors, but we've had requests from the Panhandle region of Idaho and so forth where there really isn't a biomass partnership up there. There's economic development that's channeled through Boise, but it's quite a ways away. It's 500 miles. There's not a lot of contact between the mothership and the rural areas up in the Panhandle up there. So
They like it that way.
some of them do, some of them don't. The Commerce would like to see it a little more close-knit. So there's a possibility that maybe we could take something in the format that we have to the Panhandle region in northern Idaho and connect with the economic development people up there. And other states, Utah, Nevada, that would be interested in perhaps starting a utilization partnership. We work in collaboration with the Payette National Forest, the Boise National, the Idaho Forest Restoration Partnerships, the national and state wildlife conservation groups and so forth, and we're all kind of collaborates to the end use of reforestation and biomass utilization and production and ultimately job creation and revenue gain. So I'd be glad to communicate with any of you. I have cards that I'll be glad to give you to any of them that have interest. Our website is you can just Google the Woody Biomass Utilization Partnership Idaho. Our administrator is the Idaho Council of Governments, and it's www.icog.com. And that will bring up a link to our website, and I'd be glad to communicate with any of you that would have interest in forming a partnership, utilization partnership such as we have up there. So that's basically it, Mark. Thank you.
Super. Appreciate